Hey. Hello everyone, my name is Lena and welcome back to my channel. It's been a little while since I posted any videos because I was very sick. Can you hear it in my voice? I feel like it's so obvious, but maybe to you guys it's not that obvious. My voice is like an octave lower in my head right now. Anyways, today I'm so excited because TXT performed at the MMAs, which they've done for the past several years. And just like the past performances, this one has a lot to do with their storyline, so I thought I would just do a little breakdown video and talk about it. Their performance started with "Shall we?" And then it goes into the VCR. But the interesting part of "Shall we" is that the W in "we" is crossed out. Now this might actually be a reference to Korean won, which has a cross through it, which then would tie into their whole theme of like loser, where the $ was the S. This is the Korean won. Maybe. But I also think it's possible that it's like a sign that they're not together anymore. They've been kind of being separated. They have different ideas. We've seen them fighting in Can't You See Me and stuff like that. So their we isn't exactly a we anymore. However, we do know, because of the flashbacks in Doom's Night, that they have to be together for everything to actually work out. I'm not going to get into exactly what that means. I did make a whole video on the Doom's Night, so you can click and watch that here. I have to think about that. Like, which side is it on? I think it's this side. And then it goes into a VCR. And TXT's VCRs are always my favorite. There's so much packed into them. So first we get a voiceover which says, "Cold loneliness in the air, and the holes were filled with sharp emptiness. The cold breath, the repeated despair. It was the only voice that came to find us among the chaos." Then the lyrics, "Please use me like a drug," appear on screen, and Subin finishes off with saying, "And like that, our world returned as if nothing had happened." So that's obviously talking about the ending of Frost, how they went to one world and it was freezing over and it was cold, and they've returned and it was like nothing had happened. Of course, we know things do happen. In the actual VCR, of course, we start by going through a hole, which kind of looks like the sinkhole, but could also be like a wormhole, which may in fact be one in the same, as I talked about in the Frost breakdown video. But I think just imagining that like it's a sinkhole or a wormhole that takes them to that magical place where everything's freezing over is enough to understand this. And it's not the first time we've seen holes, so. And very interestingly, this says, "Will we still be together at the end of our adventure? Will we?" Anyways, it comes to them all standing and watching the like freezing coming in. In the background in all these shots, it does kind of remind me of what we saw in Subin's portion of the Frost music video, which was said to be part of like an ancient city, and it does kind of look the same as that, with that like Roman or maybe Greek, I don't know them apart very well, but it does remind me of that architecture style, and so I wonder if this is part of the ancient city and if it has to do with their magic island, that reality, in some way. We're likely to get more answers on this in the future because we're going to be getting the webtoon soon. So yeah. Anyways, the thing that we need to know is that everything is freezing over and becoming frosty, which we saw starting in 0 by 1 equals love song, which in the voiceover Subin mentioned any holes are being filled with this like frostiness. And it emphasizes this fact with everyone like having like cold breath and cold air and like becoming more frozen, I guess. And then it ends and we go into the performance for 0 by 1 equals love song. In this performance, everything is freezing over like usual. I think that's the main point of this like whole comeback and repackage was, you know, freezing, the frozen part. TXT have very obvious bloodstains on their clothing, which reminds me of their recent Japanese music video for 0 by 1 equals love song, where they had actual bloodstains on their clothing in that music video. That's not surprising, since that music video also kind of fit within the idea of their story, while also referencing other things. I talked about it in my reaction video, but it seemed like it was referencing like our impact on the environment and stuff like that. Again, the frosty setting, a reference to their island freezing over, as we saw at the end of the 0 by 1 equals love song music video, where they're kind of cold, trying to keep warm, they're trying to start a fire. They definitely do start a fire, kind of. However, the aesthetic of this whole set reminds me of the world version of the Freeze album, which again sort of showed that their world was freezing over. So that all checks out. There's also an ice castle behind them, which, you know, there's a lot of different things that can reference. Hogwarts, but Frozen comes to mind. Of course, Hogwarts was a main focus of their magic comeback, but there's also the idea of Frozen, like the Disney movie, where, you know, Elsa creates an ice castle and she goes there to escape from everyone, and there's a strong theme of escapism with TXT, even with, you know, Hogwarts as well. They're running away to Hogwarts, so they've run away to this frozen, detached reality. I do like the archway. I wonder why they chose that archway. It kind of looks like it's like flowering outward, like it could be a flower or it's blooming, which is very interesting. But let me know what you think about that, because I don't have any ideas about... Also, the whole thing in general might be related to the story about the Snow Queen, which is like a fairy tale. Essentially, in the story about the Snow Queen, there is this mirror that was dropped and it shattered everywhere, and wherever it landed, it basically like froze people's hearts so that they could no longer see any good in the world. And it ends up in the heart and the eye of this one boy named Kai. In the fairy tale was named Kai, not our Kai. Although I wonder if that's a coincidence or not. And obviously his heart is frozen. He can't see good anymore. So it's all about like his friend going and trying to rescue him to essentially like thaw his heart, which sounds very familiar to Moa thawing their hearts. Anyways, I thought that was an interesting similarity as well. They've still stuck with that whole idea of the Snow Queen, which, by the way, Frozen I think was loosely based off of the story of the Snow Queen, although it doesn't, in my opinion, resemble it at all, but that's fine. Anyways, so immediately after this performance, we see that they're cold and frozen, again, just like the ending of the actual music video, and then everyone kind of like gets kidnapped, except for Kai, who obviously starts the dance break. And oh my gosh, I love TXT's dance breaks because there's so much just in the choreography. First of all, they're so good at dancing, they're so passionate, and they're very like in the vibe of whatever's going on in the dance break, and some of the moves can usually be kind of telling. I like to examine them. However, I do want to say that this particular choreography reminds me a lot of their like concept trailer for the Freeze album, and it even has like similar moves like Yanjun disappearing, for example, them fighting some invisible enemy that's throwing ice at them. I don't know, it's definitely like a callback to that concept trailer, which is really interesting, and it even references Moa at the end, which is exactly what happened in the concept trailer. So yes, an actual guest does appear for this. I think her name is Nose. I don't really know anything about her. I do wonder if this means there's going to be like a collaboration in the future with her specifically, because it seems weird that she came in at the end and didn't even like, you know what I mean? But she is supposed to be, for us, in the regards of the storyline, like personification of Moa, who's always been personified as like a ghost or like a girl with just like a nondescript face. So I think it's really interesting that they've actually like definitely made her Moa in this particular instance, and she reaches out a hand towards them to help save them. That's the idea, right? And it's just like their lyrics imply. They need us, Moa, to help save them. At the end of this, the screen breaks and, you know, it's like ice, and then it glitches, which we've seen in the Dooms Night before, and then it reverses time, which is obviously a callback to that Magic album especially, and like just previous things where they've constantly reversed time before, messing around with some time things. And interestingly, Moa just tried to save them, and now they've reversed the time back, so something went wrong, they weren't happy with it. And then, of course, it goes into their repackaged album, which is Loser Equals Lover, with the text that states, "But I am still a loser." Now, I came to this similar conclusion when I examined that music video, but a loser is anyone who, like, consistently, like, reaches toward their dreams in a way that is, like, self-serving, specifically when it's oriented around money, like people who are constantly just trying to go for more and more money, and then they kind of ignore the people who love them or the people that they love instead, like, and go for money instead, you know what I mean? And in the song Loser Lover, they're trying to like get the money for Moa, but that ends up making them the loser, the money, and Moa are just still waiting for them, in theory, and they're trying to help, but because of the choices that they've made before, it kind of makes them a loser in that sense. Anyways, as I mentioned, they clearly reversed time, and we don't see Moa at all, and this is sort of similar to the Frost music video as well, because as I mentioned, in that music video, there was no sign of Moa. And again, we're not seeing Moa. Like, Moa was just there, and they reversed time, and now Moa's not there. So, yeah. Very interesting. Anyways, in Loser Lover, during the chorus, it does like a bit of a break, and we switch scenes. God, I literally can't with filming today. They end up on a plane runway, which is iconic. And it was very present in the like original music video for Loser Lover as well. Like the idea of like running away, getting rid of the idea of money and just being able to go off and do the things that you want to do. Of course, as I said, like the one thing that most of us can't do right now is literally run and fly away. Like you can't. everything's closed. And it puts that want of being able to go away somewhere very present in our minds. TXT stories are really good at like TXT story is really good at like paralleling our current reality. And while I don't think it's as obvious as We Lost the Summer, the music video for that, where it was definitely talking about the pandemic, I do feel like they specifically chose these things because a lot of people right now can relate to it. And TXT is a lot about relatability. It was clearly a factor in choosing the set for this particular performance. And I appreciate that, because I would also love to get on a plane and go somewhere right now. And I can't. The fire at the last chorus was a really nice touch, though, where it, like, sets the lover on fire. I think you can interpret this in two different ways. The first is that Moa are trying to thaw their frozen hearts and, like, melt them with, I don't know, the fire or something. But I think the second way you can also look at it as, like, they're burning away the love. Like, they're not lovers anymore. They're only losers, because we're still losers. Like, that's what it started with. So I'm kind of leaning towards that for my own interpretation, but let me know what you think about that. Both of them, I think, work because we don't exactly know what's happening next in the story at this current moment in time. Anyways, at the end of this, the fire kind of peters out and just leaves smoke. And we go into a dance break! What an outro. I cannot stress this enough. I love TXT's dance parts. I already said that in this video, but I literally love it so much. So this whole thing does a great job of feeling transitionary, like they're transitioning into something new. And we get some really intentional, like, close-ups on Yanjun's smirk, which almost looks a little evil, really embracing the feeling of, like, the song Frost, which had, like, that kind of unhinged laughter. Something that's also interesting about this particular dance break is that they're wearing suits, which kind of feels like they've grown up. They've become adults now, and there's, like, a lot of focus on, like, them going from childhood to adulthood, especially in the Blue Hour era, which was the mini-sode, which in theory could be next. There could be another mini-sode 2, maybe. And again, this feels a lot like the outro that was from their previous MMA performance, except that it ends differently. And of course, everyone was very excited and kind of freaking out about this one particular moment. Yanjun, he puts on a mask, which the mask itself, I'm not sure how well I'm able to examine it. It looks like it's got two different halves, two different sides. Kind of reminds me of, like, the idea of, like, the theater mask with two different sides. The whole thing of it kind of makes me think of BTS's persona. And then, of course, he shoots himself in the head. We can look at this particular action in a number of different ways, so let's just talk about that for a second. First, like BTS, who crushed their personas, he is done with pretending, and thus he also, you know, takes out his persona, which is a symbolic way of achieving self-actualization or individuation. Now, I've talked about this a really long time ago, so if you don't remember it, that's totally fine, but I do think that TXT are mimicking the idea of self-actualization, like the idea of it, but in a different way. So BTS are doing it basically by the book as Carl Jung interpreted it, with the map of the soul and everything like that, but I think that TXT are doing it a little bit differently. They're following the formula of creating a philosopher's stone or a magnum opus, which historically, yes, people thought it was like the thing that, you know, turns things into gold, achieves immortality, whatever, but like in a more practical sense, it was a way of achieving basically the same thing as self-actualization. In fact, Carl Jung even talks specifically about the idea that the Philosopher's Stone is actually referencing like an internal process. So in Carl Jung's interpretation, the death of the persona is basically a way of like accepting it into yourself. However, if we translate this exact process into the creation of the magnum opus, then it might be like the blackening stage, which is the nigredo stage, which is basically decomposition. So you need to decompose something and then recompose it later, basically. And I've talked about this in a video a long time ago, so maybe a card up there if I remember. And interestingly, after this decomposition phase, it leads into a chaos phase, so it's possible that they already did the decomposition phase and then this is the chaos phase, because after all, this was called the chaos chapter, and it's essentially like a spiritual death. Okay, I said this wrong in the video, but it's actually the same process as the deconstruction phase. Whoops. Which means that if TXT are following this particular way, that the next stage might be the whitening stage if they're not already in the whitening stage, which is basically like the purification stage, the albedo. But it's hard to say at this particular point in time, but it might actually help explain Yeonjun's deaths, which we've seen several times, actually, so are we even really surprised that Yanjun is dead again here? And I think that this particular thing is something that Yanjun is actually very aware of. After all, he has seen himself literally be dead before. And this also plays into the idea that he, as a character, feels guilty and that everything wrong is his fault. I don't think his friends necessarily see it that way, though. After all, Taeyeon was very upset upon seeing Yanjun die in both Eternally and with the cat in the Doom's Night. Yanjun, please stop dying. Just... By the way, I think they've actually possibly referenced the mask before. In the choreography for Can't You See Me, there's a part where they're on the ground and they go da 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 da. Basically, it looks like they're taking the mask off their face and then crushing the mask in their hand. To me, that's what it looks like anyway, and I feel like once you see it that way, it's hard to unsee it. Could just be my interpretation, and it might be wrong. But again, like I said, the choreography does seem to be kind of important, so let me know what you think about that. Anyways, the text that appears on the screen as Yanjun is lying on the ground is "Thursday's child has far to go," which is referencing a nursery rhyme, which was meant to like help teach children the days of the week, basically. Obviously, every day has like a different, like, I don't know, virtue associated with that child that is apparently born on that particular day. TXT has a lot to do with nursery rhymes and fairy tales specifically. Magic Island has title cards that look like they're from a book. Their 2019 MMA performance literally opens with a girl reading a storybook about TXT's story. And then, of course, the actual pop-up book that they own that has, like, I mean, children's storybooks are clearly a big inspiration for TXT's story. And, like, especially, like, the Grimm's fairy tales, I feel like it has, like, a very similar vibe, you know what I'm saying? Just the tone of it is really similar. Like, it feels like it's kind of darker. It's got, like, the theme of there's something that you have to learn from the mistakes that are made within the fairy tale. Anyways, on this text that appears is an aurora. And one thing that you have to note is that in every performance prior to this, they've hinted at whatever the next album will be called. So we got like the Eternity hint before, and we've gotten the Chaos hint. So part of me wonders if this text itself, or maybe the effect surrounding it, the aurora, is a hint for what we are going to expect to be the title of the next album. So we just had Minisode Blue Hour before, obviously, the Chaos chapter. And because it was Minisode 1, we're thinking there has to be at least another one, if not 3, because they seem to like the number 3. And previously people were like, oh, that the first one was Blue Hour, so the next one maybe is like Twilight or something like that. But let me throw it out there that maybe it has to do with like Blue Hour Aurora, or like Aurora Borealis, you know? Something to do with the lights, maybe? Because that's a thing that happens at nighttime, right? So, you never know. I feel like in some way, this final text is, in fact, a hint for the next album. Maybe it has to do with Thursday? I don't know. If you have an idea for what the next chapter could be called based off of what they've shown us, leave it in the comments below, because I might make another video with, like, theory ideas, because the last time was really fun to do that. So I don't know yet. Just don't take that for sure, because I have a lot of videos I'm working on right now. By the way, I just wanted to say none of TXT were actually born on a Thursday. I double checked. Yanjun is not born on a Thursday, even though he's the one who's there. However, Moa, the day that we got our, like, name, it was, in fact, on a Thursday. And Yanjun's right there, and Moa are supposed to save them. So it makes me think, like, Thursday's child has far to go has to do with Moa. Like us, you know what I mean? And that must mean that we have a long way to go before we can actually save them, because clearly this loop where Yanjun keeps dying and then they have to reset and go back to the beginning is still happening. It's just continually perpetuated. TXT's story is not over yet. Unfortunately, this video is over now, because I don't have a lot more to say. That was kind of where I wanted to leave it off. But I hope that it helped you, like, understand their performance a little bit more and, like, identify with it a little bit more as well, because there was a lot of stuff in there. I think there's probably even stuff I've missed. Like, I looked at the choreography, but there's so much that you can't tell if it's just meant to look cool or if it's, like, is that supposed to be, like, a hint of, like, what's gonna happen? I can say for certain that they looked awesome. I can say for certain that we're going to be getting some really exciting stuff. Obviously, we're going to be getting the webtoon in the future, in January it's coming, which, by the way, I did already film a video talking about the webtoon. I was sick. I already said that, but I was sick and I have not completely edited that video yet. So these videos are going to come first. I'm also going to post one for Enhypen, so make sure if you want to see me break down Enhypen's story as well, that you are subscribed for that. But also I have like a breakdown coming about their webtoons and like the things that we know and the direction it might be going for all of the webtoons that were announced, not just TXTs. I'm obviously not 100%, but I am feeling a lot better, so hopefully I can get back on track before the end of the year. We'll see. Let's not make myself sick again. But so yeah, if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe with notifications turned on so that YouTube tells you every single time that I post a video. All of my social media are linked in the description below. And of course, I wanted to give a shout out to my patrons over on Patreon. Thank you guys so much for your support. As it is, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you have a great day, and yeah, stay sunny, my friends. Bye!